continue to guide you through the lands of night, one can find that not all sacrifices are those of the flesh. The Doctor-Patient Relationship by StoryMan-Jack. Susan, in her crisp, pale business suit, caffeinated eyes bright behind dark designer sunglasses, and clicking her 6-inch black heels on the walk, entered her office building. She nodded to the large security card behind the information desk as she headed straight for the elevator, hoping that she was early enough not to find a patient waiting for her when she arrived. Today, that possibility was insignificant since she set aside the entire day for one very special patient. Though unscheduled patients showed up oftentimes when a crisis occurred in their lives. This man, she thought, might be close to committing a crime. Someone very disturbed, someone she wanted to study. She didn't want to study him for a paper or some sort of research project. She wanted to study him because he fascinated her. Of course, she thought, as she stood behind the closing doors, if he's about to commit a crime, I'll gain some points for turning him in. She checked her watch. Half an hour, she noted, and waited for the doors to open. She entered the already unlocked glass doors to her office and noted that Trish, her busty assistant, stood behind the reception desk. "Thanks for coming in, Trish," Susan told the older woman. "As soon as he's here, let me know." She looked the woman in the eye. "Once we're settled, I'll buzz you," she explained, "and that'll let you know that you're okay to turn out the lights and lock up for the day." "What are you doing, Susie?" she asked. "This guy," Susan told her, shaking her head. "Something curious is going on with him." "Mr. Pondwater or whatever?" Trish asked. "That little guy? He creeps me out, Susie." Susan shook her head. "It's Fudpucker, and the reaction you have is only due to his scars," she said. "Your instinct is to be repulsed because of the genetic disorder. It's all biology, and once you speak to him or begin to really understand what he's been through and what's happened to him, what's nearly broken him, you begin to understand that he's asking the fundamental questions that everybody asks without even realizing it." Trish put her hands on her hips. "All I know is that he's a creepy little dude." She paused and pursed her lips. "He's smarter than everyone I've ever known or will know, and he damn well wants everyone to know it. Plus, yeah, there's them scars. I'm sorry, I just can't get past it." "Well," Susan told the receptionist, "everything will be just fine. Trust me, I have everything under control." She made her way through the therapy room, appointed with the most relaxing and comforting decor she could find. Every color, every texture chosen to soothe a person's soul. And then she moved into her small yet functional office. The room was no more than a closet, consisting of nothing more than a desk with a laptop, a few shelves stuffed with established journals and reference books necessary for her field of care. She had a few books, however, that were a bit more unconventional. She looked lovingly up at her rare, if not one-of-a-kind, copy of The Inferior Mind by Hans Asperger, the very scientist that used human test subjects in his horrific experiments during the Nazi era. Everyone knew, but few would admit that some of the most advanced medical and mental health breakthroughs were from that era. Susan admitted it was murderous and wrong what they did, but she couldn't deny that she had no moral objection to using the results of the research, as abhorrent as it was. She hadn't done the experiments herself, after all. Before she knew the time had passed, the buzzer sounded from the desk phone. She touched the button and said, "Yes, Trish?" Mr. Fudpucker is here for his appointment, ma'am," she informed, her voice not too pleased. Send him into the therapy room, Trish, and thank you, she told the woman. The psychiatrist took a deep breath, grabbed her digital voice recorder and notepad, and entered the room. She stopped almost immediately. Something had changed in the man. He sat, scarred, face downcast, sitting comfortably, leaning on the couch. He was relaxed, if not... He was confident, it seemed. Almost like he was sitting straighter than normal. His suit fit him better than the last she had seen him in, and he looked slimmed up a bit. He looked more like somebody going through just a hard time, more than a member of the throwaway class in the mentally ill community. Well, the sing-song voice of the man said as Mr. Fudpucker ran a hand through his hair, I do like what you've done with the place. All to make the patients feel more relaxed, Susan told him as she moved to the opposite couch. He nodded. So, his eyes moved to hers, and she never flinched back. What now? That is completely up to you, Mr. Fudpucker, Susan told the man as she leaned back. Be aware that this session will be recorded, and I am taking notes, okay? I like that, he said, looking up, closing his eyes and then swaying as if he were high. You like that I'm taking notes and recording? She asked. No, he began, opening eyes and smiling, his cold eyes locking with hers. That you don't flinch back. He pointed at his scarred face. I can tell people when people are disgusted. He chuckled. A little sensitive to it, you might say, he told her. And you just aren't disgusted at all. You see past it seems. Susan shrugged. Outward appearance has never been anything I cared too much about in people. I care about what's inside, and if I can help spruce it up a little. Well, it's not just that, he nodded. You've gotten my name right, Janet. Every time from the very start. He paused, tapping the side of his head. I kind of do research for fun. So I did the research, and did you know that with the data I've collected over my life, all the anecdotal misadventures you see, that 99.342% of the time, everyone calls me Pudfucker. At least once, and within 3 interactions, and usually the very first time they try to pronounce my name. It's like they're consciously thinking, don't say it, and then they say it anyway. Well, that is terrible, Susan told him, and you may call me Dr. Heinrich, or if you're more comfortable, Mr. Fudpucker. I'm sorry. I'm truly sorry. I believe it's because we were discussing that very subject. Mr. Fudpucker, you may call me Susan, but my name is not Janet. The man stood and waved the woman away. You seem like a Janet to me, he said, and then laughed, the sound becoming increasingly manic as he held on to it. All right, Susan told him. We'll just move past that this once. If it makes you more comfortable, that is. This session will all be about just opening up to talk about what you're most comfortable with bringing to the front. He spun and locked eyes with her. That is somewhat confusing, you see. He smiled, his scarred face making it look hideous. I'm an open book. I mean, it's just you and I. He waved his gloved hand at the notepad and recorder on the table. The tape. The pad of paper also, of course. But that's of no moment. I'm here to unload, you see. To see if you can understand, to... He paused, his voice growing low and menacing. To confess. The hissing sound of his voice turning into manic laughter. Yes, to confess. Susan bristled. I see. The guy certainly was creepy, but if he did confess anything of use, she could probably live off his psychosis for the rest of her life. The papers, the research, the books, the whole gamut. A grand or two even in the mix. This broken and confused man could be her meal ticket. Please sit, she told him, picking up her notepad and scribbling down a form of shorthand she'd pretty much invented for herself so that her notes could never be used against her. She smiled and waved at the couch. And we'll go into it. I've set aside all day for you, just as you requested. Sitting down, the short, balding, scarred little man smiled. I do appreciate it, Janet. You see, I need to, as I said, unload, you know. Betrayal does that to a fellow. Elaborate on that, she asked. What betrayal? Oh, no. Hold your horses, my dear. He laughed, his mania reverberating in every word he said. You see, you must understand. Understand why I really understand, Janet. Why? She smiled. Well, go ahead. Say whatever's on your mind. There will be no judgment from me. This place is safe. She leaned forward. I promise. Well, now, he smiled. Something like she didn't know. Lust, maybe, in his eyes. That is a comfort, I assure you. But reason is just as important as the need to unload. You see? Janet nodded, completely enthralled by the little scientist. Yeah, that was right. He was a certified genius, one of the top 10% of IQ scorers in the world, she thought. I just have to be careful. I'm not getting manipulated by the man. Oh, penny for your thought, he sang like a child, her eyes again focused on him. He shrugged. I saw it go across your face, you see, and I'm a curious sort. I was just thinking that, she smiled, softening the words, but trying to show that she would be honest with him. That I should be sure you aren't manipulating me, as intelligent you are, Dr. Fudpucker. He leaned back. Why, you are good, aren't you, my dear? He laughed. That is a problem, isn't it? Well, I can assure you that I'm not manipulating you. Hence, the reason for my being here is just as important as the need to confess. The laugh, the crazy, clear in it. What is that reason? She asked, nonplussed. The little man grew excited. So excited, in fact, that she thought he would jump up on the couch like Tom Cruise and start jumping up and down. It's the process, you see, the one I was shown. I've to let go of everything, not just my material and monetary wealth, but my angers, my loves, letting go of the regrets, the losses, even the wins, you see. Susan took down a note and then looked up at the man, his expression expectant. I see, she paused, thinking, tapping the pen against her lips. I can see how that is a logical way to think about it, but you can't just let all that out and not deal with the feelings that it evokes. You know that, right? Well, hence why I'm here to see you, young lady. The little man laughed, bouncing. You get to help me deal with all that terrible and messy emotional baggage, you see, before I can move on to the rest of the process. And what is the rest of that process? She asked, her eyes raised. His white gloved hand came up. Oh, no, he sang, shaking a finger. Not just yet. No. We must take the first step before we can even contemplate the next. The next step? She asked. Describe the first step as you know it, or understand it and how it's supposed to lead to the next. I would like to understand. I suppose, he drew out, making the exaggerating expression as if thinking hard. It wouldn't hurt to tell you that much. Well, he chuckled almost apologetically and then started to whisper, literally holding his hand up as if he were a child telling a secret. The order might not care if I just tell you that much. I'm sure. And then he leaned back and winked. The doctor was at a loss. This guy wasn't just delusional. He seemed to be bordering on religiously delusional, she thought, and then wrote in the notes after glancing up at the time to document so she could bookmark where the recording was at that point. This guy would be a gold mine. It wouldn't just be her meal ticket. It would be the meal ticket for her family for generations. Let's not push about this order thing until later. He's already pretty much said that he needs to focus on his first step or whatever it is. So, he leans close, as if to enable a conspirator. It's called the cleansing, you see. Or, if you want to be literal about the translation of that damn book, it's the 3 sacrifices, which I suppose is the literal truth. He was struck by a thought and temporary loss in it. So, if the sacrifice of truth, from your perspective, your life, all your memories, emotional markers in your life, right? She asked, trying to come to terms with what he was telling her. Yeah, you get it. He paused, smugness coming over his head. I knew you were right for this, Janet. I just knew it when I saw you. He nodded. All the while he spoke, and suddenly started shaking his head. But no, not a literal sacrifice. I mean, it'll let me keep those memories, but like a sacrifice of me to let my past rule my future, you know. That is, he began to ramble, the path, you know, the release of what holds you back or pushes you forward down the path. You know, that thing that makes you hate or love or want or need, that stuff. To let it go in the literal sense without forgetting it altogether or the lessons it learned. You know? In order to slow the man down, if for no other reason than to get him to take a breath, she asked, forcing the exasperation in her voice. You are a very intelligent human being, Doctor. Fudpucker, in point of fact. He laughed. You like saying that, the scientist pointed out. And all that means, Janet, you may call me Leonard if we're going to be so informal. And Leonard fluttered his eyelashes in a comic way, causing the image of Bugs Bunny trying to seduce Elmer Fudd for some reason to pop in her head, and it sent a shiver down her spine. Comfortable, he drew out. But would you like to know why? Susan, lost in his meandering line of thought, didn't even know what he was talking about. Why what? Leonard sighed in embellished exasperation. Why you say that all the time? She looked at him and shook her head. Say what exactly? She asked, completely lost and off balance, as she knew that was not a good place for any therapist to be. Why you like to say the phrase, in point of fact, or in fact, or, you know, the scientist laughed. Or could you already tell me this is supposed to be your field of expertise after all? She smiled. I know, but why don't you tell me what you think? How lame, he railed, as if she didn't know better and would have thought there was a real rage in his scarred face and voice as he stood and spun around to stand behind the couch watching her. All right, she said. Most people use those words because they are unaware of their own intelligence. Also, they speak passively in order to enhance the effect, making themselves think that they appear more intelligent than they are, when in fact they're not using the phrase properly in the first place. But you aren't doing that, are you? The man asked, smiling as if he knew a secret. Perhaps, she noted. I mean, no one sees everything when they look in the mirror. More objective eyes could see it if I were, but no. I speak this way because it is being recorded, and it makes it easier for me to transcribe for understanding and for the purposes of formatting the documentation. Oh, the man let his face fall in disappointment at the answer. I was just going to say that you... He paused, pointing at her, and then doing that weird Bugs Bunny fluttering of his eyelashes thing that creeped her out. We're trying to impress me. Oh, she asked, understanding that if this was leading to where she thought it was, she had to stop it now. She could not put herself in that kind of position with somebody this disturbed. How so? You think I'll hold back? He answering, even as he jumped back over the couch and landed in the position he had left sitting. This is exactly what I mean, Susan told the little man. You are very intelligent, so why do you insist on calling me Janet? I don't understand. The man shrugged, smiling, another thing about him that began to appear almost manic. You look like a Janet to me, he said, and then winked. Or I could just break down and call you Susie Q. Oh, heaven help us both. Oh, don't say that. Leonard started acting exaggerating fearful. She ignored the act. At any rate, what I meant is that I will admit that Janet sounds better than, what did you say? She said, grimacing exaggeratedly. Susie Q? They both laughed, though his was still a little creepy and hers came out a little nervously. After the session, she would have to take some time and really think about what made her so uncomfortable all of a sudden, how it had come upon her. The man was being legitimate and honest, she could tell. So, the doctor began again. Talk. I understand that this... She looked back at the pad in her hand. First sacrifice is why you're here, correct? Exactly, he said, staring at her. So, go on. Elaborate. She rolled her hand in front of her as if to gesture for him to start talking. Well, he sighed, shaking his head even as it sank so he could watch his own feet, the mania almost disappearing. There was this girl, he began to tell his tale. So, if I understand you correctly, you kept the name and the scars, as she convinced you, as badges of honor, to use as a shield. That you didn't really need to have anything because you had power over them. That's actually pretty solid, she said after a moment. Well, yeah. He seemed dumbfounded. He had felt the need to clarify, though. I mean, it's like every after-school special we ever watched as a kid, right? He asked. And they demanded. Live with your imperfections. Everyone will see past them. You'll be stronger. Those who will make fun of you don't really matter. They're just thugs. He listed, his voice becoming more and more heated and manic. I see, she interrupted while he drew a breath. Do you, though? Oh, yes, I think I do. No, I don't think you do. We've been programmed, all of us. We've been told that the bad stuff really isn't there and that we don't need to be afraid of nothing. That we don't need to stand up for ourselves. That we don't need a safe place. The little fiction society tells itself. When the individual's spouting that drivel, damn good, and, well, the world doesn't work that way. Well, it does work that way. People are mean as shit. And never will. Not in any economic or social society. It won't. It can't. You see, the very thing I've come to understand, he paused as if for effect, that society is programming itself, not any cabal or underhanded group or even an individual actor. Just the lies we tell ourselves so that the necessary ugly things get done and so that our nature can be hidden from each other and that the societal knowledge we subsequent generations will need to survive is flawed. And these little lies eventually have us ripping ourselves apart, feasting on one another's bones. And how do you feel about that? She asked, smiling a wicked smile. Now? He shrugged. I say fuck 'em all. He smiled and leaned back as if getting comfortable again. Well, why is that? Because of the other betrayal. He laughed. This one sad and tired. They were back to back, you see. One night and the next day, she threw me away and they took out the garbage. Who? The doctor probed. He told her how the government and his research partner had taken the programming language he had created and the code he'd written and used it to create more or less assassination drones, an AI that would adapt and locate anyone on the planet according to their DNA within a 0.00001% failure rate. They paid him well, but they threw him out, forcing him to leave the project, the university, and he had a feeling they were the ones preventing him from ever working in his field again. No one would hire him. Oh, the excuses were, oh, you're way too overqualified. Oh, we just need a lab assistant after all. Things of that nature, he could tell, were made up. They didn't like him. Nobody did. Except the order. Except his lord. And your partner? She asked, taking copious notes. Oh, he made billions. Hell, probably trillions. It looks like, she asked. She prodded, pushing the man a little bit. Oh, yes. Trillions and trillions. And the government assassinating, feasting in blood. Yeah, that's where the real bucks were, I suppose. What was their reasoning in forcing you out? And he snarled his response. You aren't the right fit. You don't look right. You don't have the right name. You make a joke of the research. You've taken it as far as you can. The anger dropped away instantly, as if it were never real. But Susan knew that the anger was more than real. It was even suppressed. It was rage. It was beyond rage, something she had not a word for, not even clinically. But the real reason why, that in my light-hearted, optimistic way, he said. The person she'd convinced me to be, you see, Becky. You know, he leaned forward again. The one who ignored the truth of me. You know, the hate-filled and violent world around us. Yeah, the one that beat me down over and over and lifted her up like an icon. He smiled. That guy who was intent on having those blinders and rose-colored glasses. He didn't invent the machine, the AI to kill. Yeah, to run drones so small they could inject microscopic bombs in anyone's brainstem without detection of any kind. He'd never let them do that. Never. That guy? The doctor asked. That guy is dead. The flat, inviolate, emotionless voice responded. So who remains? She asked, wondering aloud. Oh, well, the man said. That comes to the second sacrifice, you see, Janet, he told her. I mean, I've told you my tale. I've given you up to the past, to the ether. Let go of the emotions. You've helped me greatly, you see. What do you mean? She asked. We never really dealt with anything about how it affected you. You just explained what happened. That, he said, my love, he laughed. My substitute love, at least, for a time. You see, he said, coming really close. The purpose has already been accomplished. I need you for something a little more. She sat frozen, shock and fear registering on her face. The gloved hands, they weren't gloves. They were something else. Something from him, as his hands, the fingers thinned and lengthened. They were otherworldly, monstrous. He was becoming a creature. You want to sacrifice me? For what? She croaked, out her fear clawing relentlessly at her throat. The man jumped back. What? He asked, hurt look on his face. You think I must sacrifice you? The hurt look turned briefly to one of confusion as he asked, and just what sacrifice would you be? I mean, think about it. He shrugged. What would I be giving up? Somebody who just listened to me? Nah, sacrifice has to mean something. Something good. Well, yeah, that's true, the doctor said, the ability to relax coming back to her. I guess I didn't think about sacrifice that way. Too much media, popular novels, television, these movies kids watch nowadays, he told her.
Another of those little fictions our society runs on, you see. Fact is, he paused, looking at her. Like how I use that. It's not one of your little phrases. The fact is, he smiled. No wonder, no power responds to just killing, to blood alone. There has to be power in it. And the power of normal folks is the power of sacrifice. It has to take something. Take something from you. It has to be something meaningful. All these lost kids, he shook his head in mock sadness. All the little missing children, he sighed, exaggeratedly. Well, they may be getting fed upon in many senses of the word, but very few are actually sacrificed to darker powers like people think. But when they are, it's usually by someone they love, someone they know, someone who cherishes them. It's that connection, the breaking, the giving it up willingly, the throwing the innocent into the pool of fire, that loss, that heartache, that pain, that's the sacrifice. Though I suppose there are some killed by sacrifices that idiots are making are just stupid. It doesn't give them nothing but lust for blood. And if you have a lust for blood, there should be meaning behind it. His voice was changing, deeper, growling.
So, what do you need me for? If not that, she was scared now, fully terrified, and unfortunately, there was no help. She could not get to her phone before he could get to her, and her receptionist was out.
Why? He said. Are you not the psychiatrist and full medical doctor and not one of these pretenders? You know, what are they called? Therapists. My favorite one is sex therapist. If you need to figure that shit out, it sounds like your life's pretty fucking good, you know?
Despite herself, and her situation, she laughed nervously. Yeah, I'm a medical doctor.
And I'm a clown. It's kind of the good thing about my entire life, you see.
He reminisced. A clown? What do you mean a clown? What is it about clowns? She asked, her instincts taking over as a doctor. You know, they kind of creep most people out.
They do?
He asked, surprised.
I guess more people are creeped out now that I think about it. I have to force to admit it, you see. I mean, Becky was always terrified of the damn thing.
She just nodded and waited, fear showing on her face, and he grinned at it.
Because that's the one thing my parents and I did. That one genuine fun thing that we did. Go to carnivals and circus.
He smiled to himself in memory.
And the clowns, those guys, the outcasts, the ridiculed, the carny folk, the lowest of the low, doing their best to make their betters laugh.
Like you? The man laughed.
Oh, yeah, only by a little bit, though. You see, I'm afraid that I am the outcast. I realized that a long time ago. That was with me from birth, from that little disease that you see on here on my face. All the spoiled looking facial features here. And I'm not really here to make anybody laugh but myself. You know? At any rate, it's in degrees, you see. And yes, I need you to help me come to grips with all this loss. This loss I'm about to deal with. You know, a good doctor I can talk to, but can also help me digest and deal with the horrors of these stages and change and the acceptance I must deal with.
The man was completely out of his mind now, jittering and shaking and clawing at his face and just nervous and under siege in his brain. I see, she said simply, stopping the tape and setting down her notebook. You know, Mr. Fudpucker, she said gently, laying a hand on his across the table. I'm not your love, substitute or otherwise. She let that sink in for a moment. We have only had 3 total conversations, 2 of which were no more than 10 or 15 minutes. He just nodded as if taking in her words. So you see, for some reason you've come into this trying to fixate on someone who, because they are listening, kind, and genuinely interested in understanding and helping you, you equate that with love, perhaps even sexual attraction, Susan explained. It's because you are so logical and intelligent that I feel you can handle what I'm pointing out. And again, he just nodded, letting her finish where she was going. Where is that exactly? Susan thought, even as she let the professionally trained medical doctor and therapist inside herself handle the situation. Perhaps if I were a man, things could be simpler, she heard herself say to the little man. Leonard stopped nodding and just stared, waiting for her to continue. I believe it best, she continued, if we tried something a little different. Leonard began to frown now, but waited for her to finish her statement. A man, I know, Joshua Reynolds, she explained, would be a great person to pick this up and continue with your treatment where we're leaving off here today. What? Leonard demanded. I believe you would not become so attached to him, you see, and he is by everyone's account, including my own, she noted, to be the best in the state for treatment of what I believe may be causing your issues. The little man frowned, growing, as he fell back against the back of the couch, as if exhausted and frustrated, and he continued his silence, watching her, eyes narrowing. When it finally became apparent that she was finished with her conversation and the session would be done, he spoke and leaned forward. I see, he said. You seem to have misunderstood me, when we set all this up. She was smiling, at least. I picked you out, you see. Your sex had absolutely nothing to do with why I did it, my love, you see. I chose you for a reason. He was flabbergasted. She didn't understand the point he was trying to make. She shook her head in question, her fear rising again. He sighed, stood, and came over to sit next to her, taking both of her hands into his seemingly white-gloved ones. You see, his demeanor became very creepy and strange. Just as the butterfly must emerge from a chrysalis after a metamorphosis, so must we follow its path of ascension and emerge from our own cocoons, like the ones that once were our bodies, a shell of our old fearful selves. Her fear grew. Just what do you mean? She asked. Oh, his face filled with malice and hunger. Let me show you the way, my dear, he said, before she felt the hand cover her nose and mouth. The bird with the red stripe. He likes you. And so another is lost, a slave to a dark being, for there is power in true sacrifice. For those creatures in the night, in the dark, Nox Veni, fear the night.